how you feel about the Minister of Finance placing such a high emphasis on energy in general, but natural gas in particular, both in terms of price and to a lesser extent on production?
I have no difficulty with either the price or the expectations that he has in terms of the energy sector. In fact, when I look at the results of NGC for the period ending August, it is much different to what it was in 2020. And we're very optimistic that given what we see, there would be some recovery of prices. And therefore, I think that the contribution that companies would make in the energy sector to the government's revenue will be better than 2020.
Okay, you were pursuing something, you were going to say something, and then you went back to kind of address my question directly. You want to finish that thought that you were on?
Only to say that the energy sector is in transition because the world is in transition. And our energy sector is made up of multinationals. And of course, we have a small stake through the NGC and through the oil companies that the government has some stake in. So to a very large extent, the revenues that we are going to get from the energy sector is based on the decisions that are being made by the multinationals globally. We are working through as a country what that means to us in the context of a future energy profile. You will recall, for example, that some time ago we had this issue with NGC investing in Train 1, and a lot of conversations around whether it was waste, whether it was this, whether it was that. The context within which that has to be understood is that Trinidad and Tobago in the energy space for some time have been trying to get a little bit more from what it has, because that's one of the other things that we have to do. We have to get more from what we currently have. And if we have a situation where in the ownership structure of the Atlantic configuration, we have 10% in Train 1, 11% in Train 4, nothing in Train 2 and Train 3. And if that is going to reconfigure itself, you really have to reconfigure it in such a way that when you come to the table with a negotiated position, you have something to negotiate about. So as we speak today, insofar as those negotiations are concerned, Trinidad and Tobago can proudly say that we have an interest of 21% that needs to be negotiated going forward. That is where we are today. Consider, for example, if we were in a position where we were saying, well, we do not now have a 10% in an entity, and therefore really and truly going forward, we were looking at an 11% ownership structure. That creates a significant weakness for the country. And what we need to understand is that ownership gives us dividends, it gives us the ability to understand the business, and it also gives us revenue from the business itself. So that all of that is taking place in the context of transitioning from oil and gas into renewables. Now, the international energy agencies, which is where we get some of our energy information from, suggest to us that while the world is transitioning, between now and 2060, gas will continue to be required, either in quantities that we currently have or in greater quantities, because the transition mechanism requires a lot of investment, a lot of change, and it requires scale for it to be economic. And those conditions are now not present. They're simply not present. Let me give you an example. Yesterday, the minister determined that Trinidad and Tobago will get involved in electric vehicles. Well, 15 years ago, a similar minister at a particular point in time said that we should move to CNG. 15 years later, we've reached, 5,000, 6,000 vehicles. We have an infrastructure in place, and the conditions are not yet economic, or the economic conditions are not yet where the majority of the population see that as a benefit. However, it is coming. Once you regularize or you move the subsidy on the current petroleum products, and you go to market price, you're going to find a situation where the price of transportation on an individual basis is going to increase. I, as an individual that own a vehicle that currently takes the petroleum that is going to be more costly, have two choices. I can go and invest in an electric vehicle, which costs will be at the beginning of the cycle, or I could consider converting my vehicle into CNG and run it for the next 10 years or 5 years of its useful life. Those are choices that are going to be available, and those are choices that are going to be made on the basis of where people are in the economic hierarchy. Therefore, the discussion around energy vehicles or electric vehicles sets the tone for investors to say, okay, Trinidad and Tobago is serious about transitioning into a renewable world. And therefore, we can now look at investment in that sector as it will build over time. So I'm saying that to say that when I reviewed the budget in the context of energy, it says two things. It says that we have to do better with what we have. So we have the traditional energy sector, and that has to continue for a little bit longer because we have the infrastructure and we have the need and people need it. But we also have to be looking at what the rest of the world is saying to us. We have to be looking at energy efficiency. We have to be looking at sustainability. We have to be looking at the development goals. And it is in that context that the energy sector has changed, is changing, will change. And those are the challenges that the country faces as it moves forward. Insofar as revenue is concerned, I think that there's going to be some stable revenue for some time based on commodity pricing. And I think that as COVID-19 releases its hold on the world, you are going to see more demand required, and you're going to see countries having to do things for the benefit of their citizens. And our product, the product that we have, will continue to be needed by the globe. So that's where I wanted to go with that. Okay,
but tell me something. We have price around $5 for natural gas. It has gone as high as $6. The minister mentioned yesterday that in the Far East it can reach as high as 20.
Yeah.
What does that mean for NGC in terms of its purchase of gas from the producers? Does it give you a decent margin now?
So at those prices, you're not going to lose money, but understand that you can do what we've always done, which is look for markets and actually trade product. So notwithstanding that the price that he's using, I think, is Henry Hub, there are 4 or 5 other global prices in 4 or 5 different markets, and we have access to it. So, for example, NGC is involved in all the markets because we actually trade. So it means that we can take a shipment and actually put it in Asia and get the Asian price rather than the US price. It's basically what we do on the market and who we partner with and those relationships. So prices generally work for us because we look for where the best price is and we put the product and we basically make money on that.
And this is something that NGC is trying to do more of now. You've been doing this for a little while, no?
Well, one of the things that I think we've tried to say is that NGC started as a pipeline country. And a lot of people understand its role as an aggregator. But the company has found that over time, that is not where it gets its value. It gets its value from being what we call an integrated energy company. That is to say, operating throughout the entire value chain. So NGC today owns products, so it's in the upstream. It has interest in some of those producing fields. It's in the midstream, it's in transportation, but it is also in the market. And in the market is where we understand the business insofar as adding value is concerned. Yes, so we've been in that business and we have cargoes that we sell on an ongoing basis, and we've been there for a little while now.
Okay. Now, tell me something. Let's get to this Train 1 issue. which has been an issue of tremendous controversy. You have indicated the amount that you own in that train 1, which is 10%.
Sure.
And you have indicated, of course, that we also have 11% in train 4. So we need to, for the purpose of this immediate conversation, we're going to zero in on train 1. Here you are, you have 10% in train 1. The bigger players like, the Chinese also have 10%.
10%, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the bigger players have 40% each. And yet you made, that's to say NGC made a significant investment in train 1, and it did not turn out well. Now, explain the investment decision, explain what happened, that it did not turn out well, and then we will see where the conversation goes from there.
Okay. So when we sat down in about November, December, what we saw is that the NGC in 2020 was facing a $2 billion loss. Second time in its history. I think it lost money in 85 and it was looking at 22. We also found ourselves in a situation where each player, each downstreamer, each company was saying to us, well, we want a lower price because we cannot use this price that you have because it's just not economical. So what we intend to do is, unless your price is reduced or the market changes, we are going to put our plant into maintenance mode. The NGC has a contract with the upstreamers which says they will supply and we must pay. What we do with it is not their business, but we have to pay. And the way we have mitigated the risk that is associated with that is that we try to do back-to-back contracts. So imagine in December, a situation where we are looking at 2021 this year, and we are seeing a situation where we have gas, we have to buy the gas, and the downstreamers, who are the individuals that we service, are saying to us, we are not prepared to take it at that price. All right? Just around December, Atlantic came to us and said, as a 10% shareholder, you are obligated to participate in the maintenance of the train 1. We said, okay, our 10% is, I think, 9 or 10 million US. No problem. We are committed to that. We are budgeted for that. We understand that.
Meanwhile, the other shareholders in the process also contributed as well to the maintenance?
No, they have an obligation to contribute.
They did not?
No, they did not.
How you explain that?
They did not have a business case for it. They said, we have no gas for train 1. And therefore, since we have no gas for train 1, contractually, we are unable to get investment approval for the train to be operational. So the issue for them is that they had gas for 2, 3, and 4, but they had no gas for 1.
Yes.
NGC.
So there was no contractual obligation on the part of the other players, owners of the train 1, to contribute to this maintenance?
Yes, there's a contractual arrangement, but if you do not have the business case for it, you can argue that you're not doing it, as some have done right now, and therefore there's no, you will manage that afterwards in the context of how you deal with those issues going forward.
Okay.
But that's an issue that is being discussed right now.
All right.
But
okay.
but having said that, there was another challenge. The other challenge was that this decision had to be made within a week, a very short time frame, because it meant that if that opportunity did not, if you didn't take the opportunity at that point in time, the next opportunity you had was in November of this year. So it meant that if you did not have the train ready from a maintenance point of view, you couldn't use it until November. In looking at that situation, and in looking at a situation where we had gas, we asked whether or not it was possible to put that gas through train 1 and sell it on the LNG market, and we worked the numbers. And I think when we worked the numbers, we agreed that in order to do that, it will cost us, I think, $500 million. But at the same time, we would do two things. We would be able to make a margin on the gas that we had, and therefore we would have the possibility of earning revenue, rather than having a situation where if you have nowhere to put your gas, it is total losses. So what we were looking at is the cost of gas being a total loss, rather than having a place to put this gas in circumstances where the downstream sector was saying that on the basis of your price, we couldn't afford it. That was not the case on the other side of the market. On the LNG side, we saw two opportunities. We saw an opportunity in the Caribbean where, on the basis of LNG prices, we would have made a small profit. And on the basis of other prices around the place, we could have made a little different profit. So we took the position that we had a case to invest in the difference between our contribution and the contribution by the other owners, if they would agree, because recognize that we couldn't do this unless they agreed. Okay.
So there was an agreement that NGC would do the investing, although they would pass, and that there would be further discussions to offset this investment.
There would be further discussions, but the discussions were not something that the NGC was involved in. The discussions were with the shareholder, which is the government of Trinidad.
That's the government, yes.
Yes. So this
nexus between the government and the person of, I would say, the Minister of Energy, who would be...
And the corporation sole. Yeah.
And corporation sole, that would be basically the shareholder, was understood to be ongoing beyond this particular investment.
Correct. And it is still ongoing as we speak.
All right.
Which raises the second issue. We felt as a board that because this particular decision around the future of the trade was not with us, should it not go positively, no future authority should be able to come and hold us accountable for that decision. And therefore we said to the government, we are prepared to look at this on the understanding that you would ensure that we are not held accountable for a decision that we have no control over in this particular case. There are two things. One, if we have to move if we have to change the basis of the contractual arrangements, it has to be with agreement, but it could go bad. So it means that you could say, no, we don't have control over that. And conditions could change, because we are committed to ensuring the petrochemical sector gets the gas on certain conditions. One, that we do not have to subsidize them, we do not pick up losses. And two, we have longer term contracts because we basically have longer term arrangements with the upstreamers. Those were the discussions, and those were the conditions under which we invested $224 million.
Okay. This is the subsequent investment.
No, that's all that went in.
Okay, so...
There's no subsequent investment.
Okay, but there were two investments. One was for maintenance, and what was the other for?
No, there was only one for maintenance. The other one was if we were using the train over the year, we would have had to pay a cost for that.
Okay. All right, and that's separate and distinct.
That is separate and distinct from the maintenance of the train.
All right. Okay. So you basically then you approached the government as the board and said that, look, you basically are putting yourself in a situation in which you have to take decisions in the best interest of the corporation, and what?
We have to take decisions. Okay, so we have to take, from the position of the board, that was a risk that we were prepared to take because it gave us an opportunity to convert what would ordinarily be significant losses if the conditions continued into some amount of profit. Let me make this point though, because I think it is not known.
Okay.
The contribution by the National Gas Company as of August, on the basis of the changed circumstances, is profitability. And that has always been the approach of the directors, to try and ensure that we contribute towards taxation in the first instance, and the cost of maintaining TNTEC, because TNTEC is basically subsidized. So the driving consideration was always, how do you carry out your mandate, which is to be profitable and to use the gas that you have in order to create value? That was the driver. And at that point in time, this opportunity occurred, and we worked out how we would have achieved that in circumstances in which the conditions were very, very different.
If the board took a decision in good faith and made a business decision in the best interest of the company, why did the board approach Corporation Sole and the government for indemnity?
There's a new feature that we've seen in state governance, which basically goes like this. When a government changes, there's a new feature where the other government that comes in basically decides that they don't like a particular decision, and therefore they go after directors, saying to the directors that, you have to defend those decisions. In those circumstances, what happens is that the individuals have to use their personal and private funds to stay out of jail because somebody is going to go after them. We've seen this in the past. Therefore, the indemnity had absolutely nothing to do with the current administration. It had to do with, in the event that an administration in the future wants to deal with this, then two things must happen. One, the individuals who were carrying out decisions in the best interest of the company should not be held liable in their personal right because they carried it out on the basis of the company. And while there is provisions currently for that, we've seen in the past where governments have gone beyond that and have actually brought people before the courts. And we're saying that in those circumstances, we want to be sure that decisions that we do not have control over, and which there may be a different view on, that you cannot hold us accountable in that sense. But even if you do, then the cost of those things need to be provided by the state and all the records of the state, rather than simply what we have seen in the past. It is on those circumstances, and for those reasons, we felt that an indemnity would cover those risks, those personal risks. That's the reason, no other reason.
Okay, I thank you for answering so straightforwardly and so honestly. I really appreciate that. And,
that's what it is.
Yes, and I want to ask you two hard questions, though, two hard follow-up questions. The first thing is that there are charges in certain quarters and there are feelings that, in fact, the board did not take the decision at all and that it was not initiated by the board. The decision-making was not initiated by the board. And that perhaps there was political interference and political instructions, possibly from Corporation Sole, but that has not become clear, and that the board was in fact divided and uncertain on how to proceed, but it proceeded anyway. How do you respond to that?
So, first of all, there was no political instruction. I think that there are two positions. One position is, do you take a short-term decision on the basis of what you see in front of you? Or do you take a position in which you look at the long term, look at the sustainability of the sector, and look at the sustainability of your role in government's revenue creation? So let me explain that. If I looked at the contribution from Atlantic over the period of time in terms of its dividend, and if I look at some of the things that we have, if we are successful, for example, with the Venezuelan discussion, it may very well be that we do not have sufficient capacity right now to bring that gas on board, and we may have to actually build a new train. So in circumstances where you understand how all of these bits and pieces come together, you should not be making a decision before the discussions are completed. Additionally, the purposes of state enterprises is to carry out government policy. And government's policy is about ensuring that the people of Trinidad and Tobago have a space in the energy space going forward. If you take the view simply that this is a dollar and cents issue, then here's what you would do. We have a budget of $54 billion. We have about $46 billion worth of revenue. If you take the view that you are not concerned about the quality of life of people, then you would send home the equivalent or reduce your expenditure to meet your revenue. We haven't done that because there is a better solution in the circumstances. So first of all, there was no political interference. There was a situation where you looked at it, you looked at your assets. We own 10% of the entity, so it's not something that we were doing outside of that. We had product, and we had a mechanism to turn that product into profitability. But we had to ensure that the government would have agreed with the position that we were taking because it was basically fraught with some risk. It was also about the government having to take certain positions, one of which was negotiating, the second one of which was changing some policy directions. And all of those were insofar as getting agreement with the government is concerned. So it had to be negotiated with the government from a regulatory point of view. How we would do that, is that possible, and why we would do that. And those were the conversations.
Go ahead.
Those are the conversations.
Do you think that there is something wrong with the political culture that you would have as a board to seek indemnity at this time, given that what you are saying from your point of view is that you made the right business decision, you made the right corporate decision, and you made that decision in keeping with your mandate as a corporation, as a company, as a gas middle entity between the producers and the various stakeholders, not only here, but globally, and your main stakeholder, who are really the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Do you think that there's something wrong with the political culture that makes the seeking of an indemnity necessary? Because you are saying that it really is political protection that you are seeking.
Yes, there is something wrong with the political culture.
Elaborate on that a little bit.
I have said time and time again that the energy sector is too important for it to be brought into the political dimension. And the reason for that is because energy is a 50-year horizon type activity. Just to be clear, for example, look at the kinds of investment that we are making. I was looking this morning to see the cost of gas that the NGC would have had to purchase between January and August. And the reason I was looking at that was to see if we didn't have an alternative, what would have been the possible losses. Let us assume that the conditions that existed in 2020 and understand that gas prices follow oil prices, where it's at 50, then it went to 9, then people were paying you to take inventory. Let us assume that those conditions occurred. Then the risk that we were facing was a loss of about $900 million per month in gas purchase. So when you understand that that's the level of risk that you have, and the implications for that in terms of the things that we are doing, you have to decide what's in the best interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And in that context, therefore, you cannot take a document that I wrote. You haven't asked me about any of the conditions relative to it. And even when I explain it, you say to me, I don't agree with you. This transaction and the deliberations of the board is the longest that we have spent as a group. I think that we spent more than 18 hours in the deliberations because we convened, we stopped. When we didn't have information, we went for it. When we had to consult, we went to consult. Actually, I think we made the decision at 2 o'clock in the morning because even when we made the decision, we had to go and negotiate with the shareholders so that they could agree. And they are global players. You know, so the Chinese had to go to China, the others had to go. So we were dealing with an environment that has absolutely nothing to do with local conditions. And therefore, when you understand that that is what you are dealing with, and you are dealing with those situations, and there are a lot of moving parts, you really and truly cannot interfere with the trajectory. We are talking now about the next 30 years of Trinidad and Tobago's entry into energy. We are talking transition. We are talking reserves. We are talking depletion at this point in time. We are looking at replacement requirements. We are looking at carbon capture. We are looking at transition into green energy to look at energy efficiency. We are looking at solar. All of those things that you are looking at, that requires your attention, and yet you have to worry about somebody who would basically say that you are gambling, that you are scandalous, and those things are so very much not the truth. Yeah. One of the challenges that we face, Dr. Tiwari, is it really worth it? At the end of the day, all you're trying to do is to do the best for those who have asked you, and then you find that your reputation goes, your this goes, your that goes, and unfortunately, the individuals who are involved don't need this. If you look at our board, for example, and you look at the technical competence, they are all individuals who are specialists in their particular fields, developed over years. Some of them teach doctors about the subject matter. How is that this board of individuals who you have selected for this particular purpose because of specialized skills, how all of a sudden they have lost all their independence and they've lost all their sense and we make foolish decisions to put them at risk? That makes no sense. But that's what we deal with.
All right. I'm going to ask you three quick questions, and I want a yes or no answer, and it's based on what we have discussed so far. The board of NGC took a business decision to the best of its knowledge that was in the best long-term interest of the company and of its interest in Atlantic Train 1. Yes or no?
Yes.
All right. Secondly, there was no political interference in the board's decision-making in this matter. Yes or no?
No. What happened?
Go ahead.
What happened is that we were sent back on about 3 or 4 occasions to look at the risk as it relates to gas supply, as it relates to price, and as it relates to what we consider to have been the best case. We were sent back 3 or 4 times.
But this is a relationship between Corporation Sole and the corporation, that's to say NGC, in
Correct.
which
Because
one is policy making and the other one is decision making for execution.
Correct.
As a middleman in the gas industry representing the state and the citizens. Okay, so I want to ask you the question again. And this is a deliberate question to get a deliberate answer because of the controversy. And that is, was there any political interference in the decision making of the board in its business decisions with regard to Atlantic LNG?
No. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to move now to something else, much bigger picture. When the Minister of Finance, not in this budget, but in the midterm review, talked about the gas sector, he said, and I quote from him, the lower production of natural gas and lower prices of natural gas have affected us significantly. At that time, the price of natural gas was under $3, which they had budgeted at. And it was projected that we would get 2.6 billion standard cubic feet per day instead of the 3.2. There is an oil side to that, but I won't get into that because you are natural gas. What is the situation now as we speak? What are the prospects now as we speak?
So as we speak today, at the end of August, the group, as a group, would have recorded a profit of close to $1 billion, and we expect that to continue. And this does not include, for example, our payments for taxes, which I think is about, all right, so the 992, which is the number that we've looked at, does not include payments for taxes that we would have provided for, which was about another $800 million, and support for TNTEC, which I think was another $500 million. So in a real sense, where we are today as a company is that we are a contributor, both in terms of profitability, in terms of taxation, and in terms of continuing with the things that we have grown accustomed to in the past. Does it mean we do not have challenges? Of course not, we have challenges. But as we speak today, we've been able to manage the group in such a way that we have stabilized it. And we think that if the prices continue as it is, and if the discussions go as it is, we expect that we would at least be able to hold on to what we would have achieved, and at least we will be able to make some contribution positively in the next year or two. What happens beyond that is a little bit too early to talk about because there are so many parts that we have not concluded on as yet, but the next year or so, I think we would be able to hold the center.
All right. I will not probe it, but I want to mention some of those parts, and you can comment on it, and we will close on that basis. We don't have to probe any of the issue. There are the 2 gas fields in Venezuela, which prospect depends on resolution to a certain degree of political and economic issues in Venezuela, and the ability of Trinidad and Tobago and its partners like Shell to negotiate properly with the Venezuelans or based on previous negotiations, to capitalize on the potential for gas in Trinidad and Tobago. And that involves the Dragon field, which is easier in the sense that you have a private sector partner there, Shell, And more than that, you have arrangements which will allow you to take our portion of the gas. And secondly, the Manatee field, which is much more complex and state-owned, but that remains a prospect. The second thing that we have are the new bid rounds that the government announced in this particular budget, and we will see how that pans out. The last time we only had Shell and BP bidding together, and we have been living so far on bid rounds done between 2011 and 2014. So that seems a good prospect. And the final thing is there are continuing negotiations now with the partners in Atlantic LNG having to do with other elements of oil and gas business in Trinidad and Tobago, which you are saying are tied to the NGC investment and which may well resolve issues in favor of the country, NGC, and prospects for the future. Am I correct in that, and would you like to correct me or add anything to that?
You are absolutely correct in that, and those are the possibilities for the future. However, even if those things don't occur, we have a plan where, on the basis of the work that we have done, we would at least be able to secure what we have. Because while we have a smaller footprint in some instances, and we have lower volumes and we have higher prices, there are levels of efficiencies and there are levels of inefficiencies in the systems that we have cut out. There are things that we have introduced which has reduced our cost. And in a real sense, there are things that we are doing. So, for example, we have recently acquired investments in the United States. In Canada, we're looking at Guyana and Suriname, and we are very much advanced in the energy space in creating those assets that we believe will earn positively for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Those are all things that are going on right now in the context of what we're currently doing. We've just received some resources from Ghana because we did some work there and they've paid us for it.
Natural gas remains a significant product because it is clean energy and the prospects for the future are good, and NGC's future with it is also good.
I would say without doubt that that is a very accurate reflection of the current situation. What makes it difficult, though, is when you get sidetracked, and when you have to spend a lot of time correcting things that really take away from the work that you need to do. So, that's all I'll say.
All right, we close on that note, which is positive, and we thank you very much, Mr. Conrad Enill, Chairman of NGC, National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, for this collaboration and discussion and conversation, because we could not have had this conversation without your willingness to engage. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'll come again.